Welcome, dear listeners. I'm Jonathan Carlin.
And I'm Benjamin Carlin.
And we invite you to join us through the Griffin door, your one-way ticket to the enchanting world of Harry Potter. So grab your wands and dust off your broomsticks and join us as we unlock the riddles inside the Goblet of Fire. Chapter 1, The Riddle House.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you inject a new word there?
I did. As per tradition with a new book, we have changed the word from mysteries now to riddles.
Oh, it could not be more perfect
Yes.
for this particular book.
For this book and this opening chapter, quite frankly.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, quite frankly. Even that's a good pun.
Even that's a good pun.
Well done. Well done indeed. Jay, I couldn't be more excited. Goblet of Fire is my favorite book.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a real kind of like a baton pass. Like, you know, a lot of times when I'm like going through and re-listening to the books over and over and over, I will like pick up with Goblet and just go through the end, because I feel like books 1 through 3 are like huge for the groundwork. It's like setting the stage. You're getting to know all the characters. You're getting to know how everything works.
Right.
The mechanics
what are the potential powers?
Right. But like,
Yeah.
you know, I think in book 1, is it not the case that like Harry doesn't cast a single spell on page
Right, yes.
the whole time? So it's like you're about to see things heat up.
Heat up big time. You're about to learn like the big unforgivable curses. We're going to learn about the Death Eaters for the first time. We're going to see like the Dark Mark for the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean the Quidditch World Cup, the Triwizard Tournament, the Goblet of Fire itself, Bobaton, Durmstrang,
Yeah.
dragons, mer people.
Right.
I mean,
we have exited the valley and are now on the large, wide open lake. Like
Yes.
the wizarding world is here in force now in book 4. Like it is crazy to me that like I think about this sometimes when I'm reading Goblet, is that prior to this book, you have been introduced to like how many Death Eaters? Snape, McNair, Wormtail, like that's it, I think. I want to say.
Yes.
To this point.
Yeah.
And like by the time, and Lucius Malfoy, but by the time you get to the graveyard in this book, you will have been introduced to like 20.
So
and like
many
before
more.
you get there,
Yeah.
like only when he's going around the circle, like only like one new name pops up.
Sure.
Like all of them will be listed systematically throughout the story, and it is like really well done. And like going into this book, you never even heard of Death Eaters, and by the end you're like, I know who the Death Eaters are.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
you're
been there the
right.
whole time.
It's definitely like a real like Azkaban Guards thing, where it's like it's funny that they're not introduced until the 4th installment, the Death Eaters, that is, by
Yeah.
name, and yet as the story unfolds, they become so vitally important.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost the same thing like with eventually the Deathly Hallows. Like it's so strange to think that they're not like a prime subject of the conversation throughout the whole saga.
Oh, I know,
You
right?
know, it's
Yeah.
like, how does that end up happening?
Or in like Horcruxes.
Or Horcruxes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. They don't come up for so long, and then they are all the story is about in some ways. So yeah, but before we dive on in, I do want to make one quick announcement.
All right, lay it on
that I think for the first time ever, we have Through the Gryffindor merch
Yes.
available for purchase outside of anything on Patreon, outside of anything you might get on tour specifically,
Yep.
outside of the book pages. This is just merch that anyone can buy at all, and it is coming in the form of a coffee mug.
Yes, I am so obsessed with these mugs. We have worked with this particular pottery company on numerous occasions throughout the years with Super Carlin Brothers. We've made our kind of signature animal mugs with a lion, snake, eagle, and badger. But this year we decided to just go all in on Through the Gryffindor. Every
Yes.
single mug is individually handmade, one by one. It is a black color. It will hold up to 18 ounces of fluid, and it has the Gryffindor like emblem knocker right there in the middle, surrounded by sort of this like fun there's one word from each book. So we have like stone, chamber, prisoner, goblet, order,
Prince
and Hallows.
Yes.
Surrounding it. They're absolutely gorgeous. There are only 300 total.
Yes.
Like hard stop.
Right.
And they take months and months and months to make. So,
yes. So
when they're gone, they are gone.
when they're gone, they're gone. If you want one, they are available right now on carlinbrothersmercantile.com. If you want to see what they look like as well, if you're watching the YouTube, I'm holding it up and we have some B-roll I'm sure we can show. They are very sturdy, very solid, and I love them so much. We chose a brand new shape of mug this year as well, which just I feel like it's just like it's strong. It's strong.
It's got a beefiness to it.
It's got a beefiness to it, you know. It's like feels good to hold in your hand. So there you go. That is our first official piece of Through the Griffin Door merch available to everybody.
So exciting.
So exciting. There you go. Go check it out at carlinbrothersmercantile.com. And if you want to see what it looks like on the YouTube channel, just subscribe while you're there.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, we're still trying to hit that 100,000. Yeah,
we're gonna get there, slow but steady. But it's gonna happen one of these days. But in any case, let's dive on in to Goblet of Fire, Chapter 1, The Riddle House, where we've got some pretty cool chapter art to be getting on with here.
We most certainly do. Yes, we get our first introduction to Nagini, who, I mean, it has to be said, is sort of kind of convulsing in a rather unique way as far as snakes typically move.
Yeah, if you look at the picture of Nagini, like the way snakes actually move is with their entire stomach on the ground, but she's got very much like a waveform going to her. She's like only touching the ground on like the bottom of every hump of the snake.
Yes.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting configuration, but either which way, we're getting a depiction of Nagini there. Then we of course have the tall chair back facing the fireplace that Voldemort is going to be sitting upon.
Yes.
So it's like he's like right there.
He's right there. You feel like very close, especially when you already know what the chapter is going to be about. It's like right on the other side of that chair. Woo! And even the chair itself, I mean, maybe it's just like the angle it's sitting at. It just looks crooked.
It does. Yeah.
It looks inaccurate in some way, and like that adds a little bit of an evil vibe to it. Even the fireplace, like the mantle is crooked, around it. Like everything about it just speaks to like this is a very evil room.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like you could easily just be like, okay, they clearly are just giving us a depiction of this imagery from a specific like angle. And while obviously that is in fact true, I think it's no mistake.
No mistake.
I think that they are definitely going for like who resides in this chair is not a straightforward person.
Not a straightforward person. No.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're not good at all. But
yeah. The other detail I was going to say is that the chapter name itself, the Riddle House, is kind of like a very clever title because, of course, it refers to the surname Riddle, that is the original owners of the home. But then there's also sort of this like associated mystery of whatever happened to the Riddle people because nobody really knows how or why they were killed.
Yes.
So there is this huge like question mark over it. There is a riddle attached to the Riddle House.
The Riddle House, indeed, there is. And we're going to get to start hearing about that riddle almost right away. We get the villagers of Little Hangleton still called it the Riddle House, even though it had been many years since the Riddle family had lived there. So right away, it says many years. They mean like, I wrote down 50, but it's actually not 50. It's like 52 years, I think, or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we will be in 1994 officially as of like when the present is happening in this particular chapter, and we know that the first Horcrux would have been made in 1942 before the Chamber of Secrets was opened.
Yeah, because the ring is actually the first one.
The ring is actually the first one.
Right, and he gets that when he kills his parents.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or when he kills his grandparents, I guess.
Right. Yeah. The death of his father and grandparents is what he uses to make his first Horcrux with.
Yes.
Yep. So yeah, it says 50 in the book here, but it is actually technically 52. If we want to keep track. Which,
indeed.
That's what we're here to do.
I know. Well, it could just be confusing because it's like I think they're using 50 as like a nice round number. Oh yeah, 50 years ago.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It might stand out a little bit if it was like 52 years prior.
Exactly. Yeah. I'd be like, okay, that seems important. But so let's see. It's set on a hill overlooking the village. Some of its windows boarded, which just kind of sounds like the Shrieking Shack as well. but this is going to be like sort of the opposite. Like, whereas you had Lupin, who was in this house and he was like perceived as a monster, but was a really nice guy. Now you're going to have Voldemort in the house, who is a monster and is a monster.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And I think it's kind of funny because it's really the last place we saw Peter as well was inside of the Shrieking Shack.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the house is literally described as damp, derelict, and unoccupied.
Yep.
Which, I mean, you could literally take that text, copy and paste it into a accurate description of the Shrieking Shack.
You can, but what you could not was once a fine-looking manor and easily the largest and grandest building for miles around, because the Shrieking Shack was basically built as a rundown shack.
Yes,
from the
indeed,
beginning.
yeah. Although it had that fenced-in front yard.
It did have that fenced in front yard. They like built it to look old, kind of a weird thing. But obviously, when the Riddles lived at the manor, it was very well upkept. They had at least a gardener and a cook and a maid on staff. They seemed like extremely uppity people. And not very well liked. But even now it's described as creepy. It honestly sounds like in its heyday, it reminds me a lot of like Malfoy Manor.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I think that the parallels there are not like by mistake.
Nope.
You know, I think that we've definitely almost got like whatever the, you know, if the Malfoys have the pure blood mania, it almost seems like these would be people who were very into the idea of being who they were,
like very elitist.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they would know of the wizarding world, so they couldn't be like, we're pro muggles. But either way, if they could have thought that way, they would have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least eventually Tom Riddle will, I don't know if he ever figures out that Merope is a witch, but like the enchantment is eventually lifted off of him and he's like, nope, nothing to do with you.
Right. Yeah. I'm out.
Which obviously that has already happened by the time he's murdered. So like maybe he's aware of magic, or maybe he's just like, something weird happened to me.
I don't know what was going on.
I don't know. She drugged
spell.
me.
Right.
Which is true, but not in the kind of like traditional drugging sense, like magically drugged.
Exactly. Yeah. Love potion.
Worse in some ways. Let's see, but no one really knows what the truth. It says nobody was quite sure what the truth was anymore, which is a funny sentence because they actually never knew the truth about what happened. It's not like, oh yeah, truth has been lost to time. It's like from the moment the rumors start getting spread, it's incorrect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. They really never have it dialed in. And Frank is kind of uniquely the only one who even has the closest version of it, but it seems like he doesn't really want to talk to anybody.
He doesn't really want to talk to anybody, and the people he actually tells the police that he saw like a teenage dark-haired boy wandering around the house that day, and they're like, who cares?
That doesn't match the description of anyone we know, so it mustn't be.
I know. It's like, dude, why wouldn't you take that into account? You know?
Right. It seems like that should be at least somewhat relevant.
He said he saw someone unusual there, and the same night everyone died. So what are you doing? Yeah, but anyway, let's see. So basically what happens is they one day all three Riddles are found dead in the house, and one of the maids come running down the hill and says, lying there with their eyes wide open, cold as ice, still in the den of things. So they're basically like frozen with the fear on their face. I guess like whenever they died, they were in such terror that it just like they got frozen that way. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's an interesting interpretation because it's like the cold as ice. I guess like if they're lying there in their dinner things, then it must be the case that this is the next morning. So they would have been there all night. So like, is the cold as ice just sort of like they've been dead for a while? Or do you think that they are like physically cold to the touch?
Both. I think it's the next morning, right? Or is that right though? Because like their maid had run screaming down the hill into the village and roused as many people as she could, I guess. But so many people are like at the bar right away, you know?
Yeah, it just says that the village pub did a roaring trade that night, which I guess could be later.
Like later that same night. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine, I guess. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. Although the fact that it says they're still in their dinner things, keep that in mind for one page later.
Okay.
That'll play at least a little bit of a role. Let's see. In terms of like how the rumor mongering and the rumor mill works in the town. which is powerfully.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So the police were summoned. The whole of Little Hangleton had seized with shock, curiosity, and ill-disguised excitement. Nobody wasted their breath pretending to feel very sad about the Riddles, for they had been most unpopular. Elderly Mr. and Mrs. Riddle had been rich, snobbish, and rude, and their grown-up son Tom had been, if anything, worse.
It almost sounds like a verbatim telling of the Dursleys. Like,
True.
It is like they are maybe not rich, but like they are snobbish and rude, and their son is worse.
Yes,
like,
indeed.
I mean, it is like they are just like some money away from being the Riddles, you know.
That's true. Yes,
Which,
I guess you can kind of rope in the Dursleys, the Malfoys, and the Riddles.
Yes.
Into the same sort of like vein.
They are all very much in the same vein. I mean, like when you meet Malfoy, he's almost just like the magically upgraded version of Dudley anyway. It's
exactly.
Like, you know,
yeah.
he's very much like that. And it just makes you feel like, man, Voldemort never stood a chance at all. Like, imagine a world where he found, like, the enchantment is lifted and he, you know, takes the baby or something. And it's like, would it have mattered? Would it have mattered?
Like, do you think like Tom Riddle, who goes on to be Voldemort, would have been any better if he had been raised by his actual father?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, probably not.
Doesn't seem like great.
I suspect that he would have rejected his non-wizarding upbringing still. He probably would have just been much more angered with them sooner. Because I think for the most part, in the beginning, he's under the belief that it must have been his father who was magical, because he thinks that his mother never could have died if she was.
Right.
And so, yeah. So it feels like as soon as he would have, like, he was always going to post his allegiance to his magic side.
Absolutely, he was going to do that. And based on the description and how similar they seem to the Dursleys, you can see a world where, like, maybe they could care about him for a while until they discovered he was magical. And I have to imagine that similar to the Dursleys, they'd be like, whoa, freak.
Well, so I mean, that's a big question too. Like, I know a lot of people have been vying for us to do like a "What if Dudley was a wizard" type of narrative. So, would that lean in your mind towards a scenario where the Dursleys would not be terribly pleased to discover that Dudley was a wizard?
No, I don't think so. I think it would be different because at the very least, Petunia at one point wanted to go to Hogwarts.
Also true.
Right.
Yeah. So then Dudley gets to live her dream.
Right. Then Dudley gets to live her dream. So I think she could rally in that regard. It might even make her feel closer to her sister and feel worse about like Lily's death.
Oh, okay.
You know, I can see that. Voldemort doesn't have that line in the water for him.
That's
if it's
true.
just him and his grandparents and his dad,
right,
who don't sound very nice at all. Not that we have much to go on here, but let's see. So anyway, the stories start flying immediately. People don't really care that the Riddles are dead. They just want to know who did it. They're all gathering at the Hanged Man, which is a great name for the pub because it's I always thought it was a good name, and like it's like Little Hangleton. So it is definitely not just like Hanged Man, like someone like, you know, was hanged there,
right,
or something, and they're talking about death, which is relevant to, you know, the story that's unfolding. But it makes sense as a name in a pub, a name for a pub in a town where the word hang is in the title. And then also the Hanged Man is a tarot card.
Yes, it is indeed. Which it was just kind of like a fun little Easter egg, maybe more than anything, because more famously, I would argue, is the lightning struck tower, which is where Dumbledore is when he dies, is also a tarot card.
Yes.
So that's like another piece of that sort of like just like crossover, sort of making its way into the narrative.
It is. And I think for tarot cards, I think like when you flip them, you get like one side or the other, and I think and like both sides represent like a different card, right? If you flip it upside down.
I think the Hanged Man in particular, it's when you flip it, it basically can be interpreted based on the orientation that the flip happens. So the Hanged Man can be sort of like your more morbid traditional version of somebody hanging from a tree, but then the other would be like flipped upside down, which would be like they would be hanging like almost like up, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so I think the orientation affects what the interpretation of the card itself is.
Okay. Well, I think what I was reading earlier was that like the inverse of the hangman was the magician. Which is then also very clever.
Yes, that is very clever. That is very clever. Yep, that fits very nicely. Okay, look at us getting into some tarot card.
Oh, there we go. I know. Oh, dude, we should do like a tarot card reading or something.
Oh,
like
we
just go
should.
get it. Like that'd be like a fun like Patreon thing or something.
My wife would be so on board for that. She has a set. She has a set.
She has a set.
She does.
I don't
yeah.
even realize that.
Okay.
I mean, that just sounds like a fun like little side thing or anything. Let's see here. But so anyway, the cook arrives dramatically in their midst and announces that a man called Frank Bryce had just been arrested. And this is such a funny, like, 5 minutes for the people of the Hanged Man, because the very first thing is Frank, never. But by never, what they mean is like not at least until like 5 minutes from now.
Yes. The confirmation bias that rages through the Hanged Man. Yeah, it basically goes from people being like, what? No way at all. And then immediately people are, I think it says, let's see here. Always thought he was odd, she told the eagerly listening villagers after her fourth sherry. Unfriendly like. I'm sure I've offered him a couple once. I've offered it 100 times. Never wanted to mix, he didn't. And then somebody immediately kind of like chimes in to like attempt to like defend Frank a little bit, and it basically says like, he had a hard war, Frank. He likes the quiet life. That's no reason to. And then the cook basically is like, who else had a key to the back door then?
I know, right?
But the thing that I think is kind of interesting about the fact that Frank did spend time in the war is that based on the timing that we would have been dealing with here, this would have been World War II that Frank would have been fighting in, and it's certainly it's no mystery that Voldemort is at least somewhat inspired by the real life Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of interesting because it means that like not on page or not even like in universe, but kind of in like a metaphorical sense, like Frank would have been standing in opposition to Voldemort,
right?
Like in his nature, in his morals, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, he has some like very Gryffindorness about him, as we'll see sort of later on in the chapter as well. This is like, what's interesting here is like it is like the power of one woman's story. It is like that the classic line of like, you always believe the first lie.
Yes.
It's like how misinformation is spread on like Facebook and stuff.
Oh, sure. Yes.
It's like people post a headline, you repost that headline, you read it, and you're like, what? No way. And then you sort of settle on that. And then it's like you have to undo that initial reading, which is so much harder than reading it the first time.
Yes.
Even when it's inaccurate.
Well, it's because you have to challenge your beliefs, and that's a very difficult thing to do. But when you've only been provided the first piece of information, it's kind of like you've already, despite how short term those beliefs have lasted, you will immediately grow accustomed to you. They immediately feel familiar.
Right. Like even if you quickly learn you're wrong, you have to like admit that you wrongly believed something to yourself, which can like sometimes be immediately hard, even if it's something over very trivial.
Yes.
Like even if otherwise it means you're right, it'd be like, no, I'd rather believe I didn't make a bad judgment.
Right.
To continue making a bad judgment.
This is going to be a small anecdote, and I'll get right back to the story. But just a couple weekends ago, we were coming back from a trip, and I missed a football game on TV that I wanted to watch. And so I asked Alice to look up who had won the outcome of a game. And I had been speaking to you that morning, and you had told me a different opponent you thought they were playing against.
Oh yeah, I think I said the Commanders were playing the Titans.
Yes. And so we were pulling back into town. I asked Alice while I was driving to look up the score of the game for me, and I was like, "Can you look up the score of the Titans game?" Thinking that would be the Commanders game. So she looked up and saw that the Titans had won, and I was like, "Oh man, okay, that means the Commanders lost."
Right.
And then later that evening, I was reading something else, and I was like, "Wait, this is saying the Commanders won today," and I was like, "No, that's not right."
Yeah.
And it was like. It was like I had this like wrong piece of information, and I was like, well, now I'm excited that my team won, but now I have to like backpedal because what happened?
Right, yeah, because I I had mistaken that they were playing the Titans when they were in fact playing the Giants because our little brother is going to the Titans game, and that's what I was thinking about because I talked to him earlier. But that's not really neither here nor there.
No, it really isn't. But just a massive piece of misinformation that what we're trying to do is relate to the patrons of the Hanged Man. That's the point.
That's
of the story.
what we're trying to get to here.
Yes.
But so you can see. Remember when we said. I guess it's two different people here, but the maid ran down and said, lying there with their eyes wide open, cold as ice, still in their dinner things, meaning that obviously they were like killed during dinner, right?
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
But then what the cook is coming down and saying later on is, who else had the key to the back door? All Frank had to do was creep up to the big house while we was all sleeping. And it's like, while you were all sleeping? What do you mean?
Right, yeah.
They were clearly awake. They weren't sleeping in their dinner things.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Already contradicting themselves.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's amazing how quickly it happens.
Yes.
Yes, that was such a good point, though.
Thank you.
Such a good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here. Then we get another line from the barman who says, "I always thought he had a nasty look about him. Right enough."
Yeah, right. and just like that, the tides have turned.
They have.
Like where 5 minutes ago, people were like, Frank would never. He had a hard war, and they're like, oh, I always knew he was a bad seed, that Frank Bryce.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah, then we jump over to Frank, who is in the neighboring town of Great Hangleton, in the dark and dingy police station, where he's stubbornly repeating that he was innocent, and that he, of course, as you mentioned earlier, had seen the only person he had seen near the house on the day of the Riddle's death had been a teenage boy, a stranger, dark-haired, and pale.
Yep. Which the police are quite sure that he'd invented him, which is kind of surprising. It says nobody else in the village had seen such a boy, and it was like, well, but
ironically, Frank is correct.
Ironically, Frank is the correct one, and basically what's happening, it's like this is all kind of, it also sort of foreshadows the next book, because what's happening to Frank here is this is just town gossip, and it turns the entire town against him very quickly, even though they previously had pretty positive opinion of him.
Right.
And it is the exact same trick that the Ministry will use against Harry the following year. Like, up until this point, everyone's loved Harry. He's done good things. He's the boy who lived. Hooray. But as of next year, the Ministry is going to be like, whoa, boy, that Harry Potter, he has some tall tales to tell, doesn't he?
The boy who lied.
The boy who lied. And all of a sudden, most of the wizarding world is going to be like, yeah. So this is just like a mini version of the propaganda that will be used against Harry in the very next year.
Yes,
Yep.
indeed. But then Frank kind of gets off because there is the unusual police report where a team of doctors had examined the bodies and concluded that none of the Riddles had been poisoned, stabbed, shot, strangled, suffocated, or, as far as they could tell, harmed at all. Yeah. In fact, the report continued in a tone of unmistakable bewilderment, something that when I was a kid, I always just thought was absolutely hilarious. That it includes that clarification.
I know. I actually just wrote like a little LOL next to that line. That's funny.
Yes. That the Riddles all appeared to be in perfect health, apart from the fact that they were all dead.
Which is also just a funny line.
Yes.
Despite the death. Then I love the doctor's note. Determined to find something wrong, said that each of the Riddles had a look of terror upon their face. But who'd ever heard of 3 people being frightened to death? But ironically, I think in the very last book, they were talking about the Grim sort of having that effect on people.
Yes, a little bit. Like once you saw the Grim, it was almost as if you were so anticipating something appearing before you that it almost would cause you to like live in such a huge amount of fear that you would end up frightening yourself to death. But this is not a Grim related situation, nor do the people involved know what the Grim is.
No, they do not. And then we get a little nugget here. It says the Riddles were buried in the little Hangleton churchyard, which is a really nice tiny little line here because it establishes the location of the climax of the book way down the line here. But it's like, oh yeah, there is a churchyard in Little Hangleton. Boom. Guess where we're going to be going later?
Yes.
And it's like, oh, where were they? Because that's literally where they're buried. They got to go get literally their bones later on.
Yep.
So that's where it's going to happen.
The bone of the father.
Bone of the father.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's one of the necessary ingredients for resurrecting Voldemort.
Pretty creepy.
Then we're going to have sort of like an interesting myriad of details in this chapter because one of the kind of odd things about it is that Frank is going to return at the Riddle house and never leave. And that seems like, given his circumstances, he's employed, no doubt, by the Riddles themselves. They are then killed. He is accused of their murder, and there needs to be this like kind of interesting through line that will like keep him there regardless for always.
Yeah.
Which I do think is kind of interesting. So Frank, to everyone's surprise and amid a cloud of suspicion, Frank Bryce returned to his cottage on the grounds of the Riddle house.
Yeah.
And it says that, I think Dot at the Hangman is like, if he had any decency, he'd leave here, knowing as how we know he did it. But Frank did not leave. He stayed to tend the garden for the next family who lived in the Riddle house and the next, for neither family stayed long.
Yeah, it reminds me honestly a little bit of Sirius, and it's sort of like, oh, everyone's so sure he did it, but like he knows he's innocent.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So it's kind of like the proverbial Dementors can't get to him down there. Like
exactly.
He's not being haunted by that reality because he didn't do it.
Right.
The other thing I think is kind of interesting about this is the fact that none of the families stay for very long reminds me a lot of the curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts position.
Exactly. I wrote down the exact same thing. Did Voldemort curse the house after he like killed his father and grandparents?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and basically we know that he air quotes, wants the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, and when he is denied it, he then places the curse on it forever so that nobody can stay there for more than a year. So it feels like this is sort of like right in his wheelhouse of magic.
It does feel like it's something he could do. And it just said there was a nasty feeling about the place, and it starts to fall into disrepair. But it doesn't matter. Even without anyone there, Frank stays around. It says, the wealthy man who owned the Riddle house these days neither lived there nor put it to any use. They said in the village he kept it for tax reasons, which I think is funny because it says that no one knew what those were. It says nobody was very clear about what those might be, and I feel like that's always the case. You always hear that it's like, oh yeah, for taxes, and it's like, I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a whiteboard and some markers and a lot of time and explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Yeah. But so Ben, question.
Yeah.
Do you think the wealthy man who owns the Riddle house is Lucius Malfoy?
It's what I wrote down.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the strangest thing about it is certainly the fact that the very next sentence is the wealthy owner continued to pay Frank to do the gardening. So it's like it seems super unlike Lucius to do such a thing.
Yeah.
But like at the same rate, it hasn't been unlike like Lucius was basically one of Voldemort's chief lieutenants. He was entrusted with the diary and potentially many other of Voldemort's old dark objects.
Right.
Per the raids on the Malfoy
Manor. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's certainly some argument to be made that this would be like an assignment that Voldemort would have put forth to Lucius.
You would think too that maybe Voldemort would like want to keep tabs on the house because it was the location of a murder. Like he wouldn't want like Dumbledore like rummaging around or like learning. He wouldn't want like anyone else maybe learning the history,
right,
or something,
right? Like discovering like what might be connected there,
right? Like keep it in house. Like you've got money, buy that house, change nothing. Don't let it look suspicious.
Don't look suspicious.
Don't look suspicious.
So what do you think, though? I mean,
it makes sense to me that Lucius Malfoy is the one who owns it because he doesn't like need anyone to live in it. He doesn't want to like go there.
Right.
Like then Voldemort because Voldemort also has that like magpie like behavior where it's like he doesn't like his Muggle family in any way, but it is like a big house that is like he did come from there.
Right.
Either way.
Right. Yeah.
He's special.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's almost like this big prominent place. It's like does it end up being like a trophy of his in a way that like whether or not it's supposed to be a symbol of his importance because it's big and showy and expensive, or more of a symbol of like his dominance having defeated them.
And it's like people. As much as he might want nothing to do with the Muggle half of his heritage, like he still remembers this house exists and he does use it as a safe house.
That is
true.
Which,
it's not like, and if otherwise anyone had inhabited it, not that that would have been a problem for him. I'm sure he just would have killed them anyway.
Sure.
But it would have been a lot harder to not have like more suspicion raised about it.
Right. Yep, of course. So anyway, yeah, the wealthy owner does continue to pay Frank, who is now nearing his 77th birthday.
Oh, that means I'm sure we could math out exactly how old he was when the first time it happened, right?
Yeah, 1994 minus 77.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm pulling out my calculator because my brain doesn't feel like doing mental math today.
That sounds good to me.
Let's see here. So
well, but that'd be like when he was born.
That's true. That would be
Right.
when he was born. Yep. Okay, so 1994.
Like minus 52, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So that would make him 25 years old to the dot.
Okay.
Would be approximately when this incident took place, which would pretty much make sense because that would have been you'd need to be 18 to go to war, be in war for some period of time, work at the Riddle household for some period of time prior to this happening because it's not like Frank was just hired. So yeah, I could totally see that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good to me.
At the very least, it doesn't disprove anything that we've assumed so far.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. It does say, though, Frank was nearing his 77th birthday. Very deaf. I just highlighted that because it's hilarious. I don't even feel like that line should have been included because Frank is going to go on in this chapter to overhear a whispered conversation from down the hall and through a door with crystal clarity.
Yes, he does a remarkably good job here.
Really good ears for a deaf guy.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like that description ends up being true at all.
Not even at all.
But we'll continue.
Yep.
It does say his bad legs stiffer than ever, but could still be seen pottering around the flower beds in fine weather. I just think the pottering
of it all. Yes,
like,
indeed.
well, there's no mistake there, right?
Yep. Even though the weeds were starting to creep up on him, try as he might to suppress them. I just highlighted that because I felt like it was really relatable. As you know,
as a gardener,
myself, it's like you can get out there, you can spend three hours pulling all those weeds, and you look out and you're like, yeah, I did it. And then like 1 week later, they're like, hey, guess what? We're back.
Right. No, it's true. Weeds are a difficult thing to overcome.
They are.
The thing that I think is kind of interesting is like it sounds like Frank is kept on. The house is in a serious state of disrepair. It's going to say that Frank had to contend with the boys from the village who made it the habit of throwing stones through the windows of the Riddle house. There were their bicycles over the lawns that Frank worked so hard to keep smooth. It's like there's a little bit of like a contradiction type thing going on right here. Like I'm imagining like a meticulously well-kept landscape juxtaposed up against like a terribly derelict mansion.
I think it's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
because it's like going to say later that it's like when he goes in the house to start investigating Voldemort, that like this is the first time he's set inside the house in like forever.
Yes, yeah,
so it's
years
like he's
and
definitely
years
not repairing the house itself.
No,
Yeah.
just strictly outside.
Strictly outside the house.
yeah,
Yeah.
so-
what a weird project for him.
I know. It's like what keeps you going, Frank?
I know. I think he's just like, I just like being by myself, and that's basically it.
The routine.
The routine of it all. It's good for him, I guess. But he believes like that the reason that the boys do this, that they're tormenting him, is because like their parents and grandparents, they thought him a murderer, which is just one of those things like the lie never ends.
Yep.
You know, it's like that was true then and that's true now, which honestly, I feel like there is, I mean, this is just getting into my own personal headcanon here, but it to me rings like there's a truth about Salazar Slytherin that we don't know.
Yes.
You know, like it's always sort of our belief that like Voldemort's entire belief system is based on like this whole pure blood thing, but like even that's a sham.
Right.
Like we don't know the full truth about Slytherin leaving the other three, but the lie has persisted.
That has always been one of the things when I think about the Founders series is that I feel like you could get into so much about those characters and what they stood for, what they represented, what they were up against, their gifts and challenges and all the rest. But nothing is more crushing than the conclusion of the series, which is the information that Slytherin was this pure blood mania person, and it's like no, he wasn't. And yet it's like there's nothing. It's like you can't stop time. You can't stop the inevitable. It's like, we know what happens 1,000 years later. We know his legacy. And it's like, it's devastating to think that like Godric's best friend, you know, like they all went through all this together. They were the best of friends.
The best of friends.
And somehow, some way, his legacy will just be absolutely destroyed. In the aftermath of whatever transpires.
Right, and it will basically take until Harry defeats Voldemort for any sense of the lie to start coming undone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is the that I feel that is the tragedy of Slytherin.
Yes.
I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
So moving back on to Frank here though, it says that so when Frank awoke one night in August and saw something very odd at the old house, he merely assumed that the boys had gone one step further in their attempts to punish him. I highlighted the phrase "one night in August" because we know that Harry is going to be looking in on this entire scene, which means that we are missing Harry's birthday altogether.
Oh, we are. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So normally it seems like that's included.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if Prisoner. I feel like he's got like the. When is it? Maybe it's in this one that that Dudley's on like the grapefruit diet.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
he's got like all the cakes
hidden
stashed
away. Yeah, increasingly stale cake. Yeah.
Yes, but I feel like otherwise we normally get a glimpse at Harry's birthday, because that's always sort of like a marker of like, okay, and the new year begins and Harry is a year older and let's go.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're right. But so what the boys have done this time, apparently, to punish Frank, is they had started a fire. And it says Frank had no telephone, which I just highlighted. Like, why? What do you mean? You don't have a telephone at all?
In 1994?
In 1994, you don't have a telephone, and you haven't been in. It's not like, oh, Frank doesn't have a telephone, but that's okay. If he really needs to make a call, he just goes up to the house and uses that one. It's like Frank just has no telephone at all. Just at all.
Right.
It's just wild. I can't. It's like that. That's like okay, if you say so. And in any case, he had deeply mistrusted the police. That makes a little bit more sense. I almost wish he had a telephone and just chose not to use it because he just mistrusted the police.
Which I think is something you could certainly then understand. It's just sort of like, it's like, I had a bad experience. So like, that's not really who I look to for aid in this particular situation.
Yep. But it's also just sort of a theme throughout all of Harry Potter that the authorities are always like hard to trust.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yes, indeed. There is one tiny little note here that I want to catch before we flip the page. But it just says, judging by the flickering quality of the light, they had started a fire. And this will come back in a minute, but he is going to be surprised that the fire is in the grate.
Right.
Yes. Which I think is funny because it means that in this, like, when he eventually gets there and realizes the fire is in the grate, it means that what he thought happened was they had started a fire somewhere else.
That they just like lit the house on fire.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like in that case, it's like, you definitely need to call someone.
I know. And like, instead of calling anyone, his is like, I'll just go on up inside the house that's burning.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's fine. Totally cool. But anyway, so he instead decides, he's like, I got to go yell at some kids. Gets fully dressed, removes a rusty old key from its hook by the door. So the cook was right. He did have a key right there. She was not mistaken on that front. Let's see. It says the front door of the Riddle house bore no sign of being forced. That's because it was opened by magic.
Right. Or Lucius leaves a key under the mat.
Yeah, or that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Frank limped around to the back of that. It's interesting that isn't assigned to Frank because, like, how do the boys get in? You know? If, like, the door is locked, how'd the boys get in?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Yeah, he does. This is of no concern to him.
Maybe they're magical boys.
They're magical boys, exactly. Yeah, let's see. He limped around to the back of the house until he reached the door, almost completely hidden by ivy, took out the old key, put it in the lock, and opened the door noiselessly, to which I'm just calling BS on. Noiselessly.
Noiselessly.
You have a rusty key and a door that's covered in ivy on a over 100-year-old house? Like, that is the creakiest door on God's planet, you know?
Yes, yeah. No, it's like, I mean, I have a house that is nearing 100 years old, and no doors open without noise.
This is a creaky door.
It's a creaky door.
It's like he doesn't take care of the house. He's not got like a can of WD-40, like spraying on. It's like, you know what? I'll spray the hinges, but keep the ivy.
How much would you have loved that if he was wearing like cargo pants and just had a can of WD-40 in his pocket?
I would love it. It wouldn't even put it past Frank. He reminds me of our like grandpa.
I agree.
I know.
100%.
He's just sort of like, well, I better go get my tools. I could just see him like living down in like the tool shed, being like, yeah, I got all my stuff. I don't
He's
need
just
anything
pottering
else.
around.
I got things to do all day, and I have like a little fix for everything. But no, that's not the case. He's got his rusty key and noiselessly enters the house. He let himself into the cabiner's kitchen. Frank had not entered it for many years, which it's like surprising to me. Like to me, like at some point, if this was me, I'd be like, I think I'm just gonna kind of like start living in the house. You know?
I mean, Frank, at least once you need to go spend the night in like the primary suite. You throw on your socks, slide around on the hardwood floors, have yourself a good old time, man.
Have yourself a good time. Because like the thing is, like the cook and the maid lived in the house. Like there are even if you didn't want to stay in the master bedroom, if you were content to be the help, there were rooms for the help in the house.
Living quarters.
It's almost weird that they had living quarters for some people in the house. They're like, no, Frank, the gardener stays out of the house. We're not barbarians, okay?
Right.
Come on. It's all just whatever. The Riddles are just cranky old people. Let's see. Then this is another interesting thing here. It says, blessing the dust that lay thick upon the stone because it muffled the sound of his feet. But like, this is interesting to me because wouldn't like Wormtail and Voldemort and Nagini have rustled the dust up some themselves?
You would certainly think so. Because, I mean, at bare minimum, it seems like he is about to go down a pathway that leads him directly to them.
Right.
So it stands to reason that someone else has already gone through here, unless it's just a house that has multiple configurations.
I mean,
maybe they came in through the mudroom, Jay.
Maybe, but the stairwell.
You
know?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. He's missing some clues here. The door wasn't already forced, and yet somebody's in there. He's like, there's the floor is covered in dust, and yet people must have walked on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's that. But otherwise, he's basically being a total ninja, despite having a stiff leg and walking on what has to be the creakiest floorboards ever.
Right.
In this house. But nope, total ninja. Muffled by the dust on the floor. Sure, if you say so.
Right, and then several feet from the entrance of the door, he was able to see a narrow slice of the room beyond. So he's several feet away from it.
Yes.
The fire he now saw had been lit in the grate. This surprised him.
Right. Surprised him, meaning he thought the fire was not in a grate. He thought the house was on fire and decides to go inside of a burning house.
Why not?
Why not? Totally fine. Totally fine. There we go. Then he stopped moving and listening intently. And this is where you're like, remember, don't forget he's deaf, but he's going to be able to hear this whispered conversation from several feet away from a nearly closed door.
No problem.
Next to a crackling fire.
Yep.
No problem.
The voice sounded timid and fearful. There's a little more in the bottle, my lord, if you are still hungry.
That's going to be Wormtail talking.
Yeah, that's going to be Wormtail talking. Yeah. And I also have a big question here, Jay. What kind of bottle are we imagining? Is this like a brewski beer bottle? Is it like a is it like a baby bottle? Like, I mean, we are going to get word that like Wormtail will need to milk Nagini, and that he's being fed by bottle. And it's kind of like, I feel like even though I know milking Nagini means like extracting venom from her fangs,
right?
It's like, it's not lending you at least to a slightly comical situation where Wormtail is feeding Voldemort from a baby bottle.
A baby bottle. That's what I would like to imagine. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And but Voldemort responds later, which are Voldemort's first words on page since Philosopher's Stone.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah.
You know, this reminds me a little bit of later on in the graveyard where his first words will be robe me, Wormtail. It's like we're really not having good entry points where the first thing that Voldemort says is like, cool.
Yeah. It's just like, later. I'll drink more later.
I'm full on my bottle for now.
Nonetheless, the voice, the way that Frank hears it, it says, it was strange that I pitched as cold as a sudden blast of icy wind. And it's like, this is not the only time we're going to hear this, is that like, it says something about that voice made sparse hairs on the back of Frank's neck stand up, which is interesting. This is like, is it like actually cold when he talks?
I know. Yeah, you're right. Like, or is it like the sound is so like cold in nature,
Right.
that it's causing that to happen. Because this idea of kind of having like the hair stand on your back of your neck could kind of come from either stimulus.
Yeah.
I also, just for funsies, I like the fact that it says sparse hairs.
Yeah.
It could have just said made the hair on the back of Frank's neck stand up, but instead we know that they're sparse.
They're sparse hairs.
Yeah,
I think that's the last time we're going to hear about like Frank's bodily hair. Got a lot of weird details about Frank here.
We're learning tons about this man.
Yeah. But so Frank turns his right ear towards the door, the better to hear, because remember, he's deaf and can't hear anything except everything.
Right.
Yeah.
But he also overhears Voldemort say, "Move me closer to the fire, Wormtail," which I just bring up because Voldemort is using Peter's Marauder nickname.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of an interesting choice.
I know, like he did, like I mean, I guess he renamed himself from Tom Riddle to Voldemort. So
So Peter was like, it's like, "What's your name?" It's like, "Well, it was Tom. Now it's Voldemort."
Yeah.
"How about you?" "Well, it was Peter, but now it's Wormtail."
Wormtail.
And like, Voldemort looks at him. He's like, "You know that's not a school, right?"
Right. He's like, "Well, my friends call me Wormtail," and he's like, "We're not friends.
We're not friends. I don't have friends.
I don't have friends. Not a chance. Not a chance at all." But he does call him that anyway. Also, just worth pointing out, as for the dust on the floor, it says Frank caught a glimpse of a small man, his back to the door, pushing the chair in place. He was wearing a long black cloak, which certainly would be dragging on the floor.
Yeah.
But just, whatever. But there's still dust. It's fine. Just, inconsistencies.
Yeah.
And now Voldemort starts asking Nike about Nagini. Where is Nagini? Which is the first mention of her, which is great. And I think this part is so funny to me. Wormtail's like, "I don't know. She set out to explore the house." And he says, "You will milk her before we retire, Wormtail." Which, first of all, gross. And he says, "I will need feeding in the night." Now, okay. So now what's actually happening here is that by milking, like Ben said, he means gathering venom from Nagini the snake. But no one in the world who says you need to milk something and feed me is thinking snake.
No.
Not at all.
Because reptiles famously don't produce milk.
They don't produce milk. No. So when you say milking, he says, "You will milk it." So this is just... Like, what does Frank think is happening here?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, in Frank's mind, because Wormtail says she set out to explore the house, right? And that she needs milking for this man. So I'm like, does Frank think there's like a cow wandering around the house somewhere?
Just like, what?
Like, what? He's like, wait, what? How did I miss a cow downstairs?
Moo.
Moo. I know. I feel like what else is he supposed to think?
And I mean, not only is there a cow, but it's exploring the house.
It's exploring the house.
It's having a good old time.
It's just like, I'm going to go look around. Moo.
Moo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moo, 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 moo.
Moo, moo, moo.
Yeah. Let's see here. He says that I will need feeding in the night, which just reminds me of raising a baby and the dream feed that you do.
The dream feed, yeah.
Which is basically like after you put your child to bed, you go and pick them up at some point in time.
I
And
know.
like, while they're still asleep,
I
feed
literally
them.
underlined that and said, basically a baby.
Yeah, basically a baby. Yeah. The journey has tired me greatly. And then Wormtail is like, "My lord, may I ask how long we are going to stay here?" "A week," said the cold voice. "Perhaps longer."
Of course, by longer, he means like a year.
A year, yeah. Like kind of like a while.
Like a while.
To be completely H with you.
Yeah.
That's H for honest.
H for honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, not H for hot.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be foolish to act before the Quidditch World Cup is over. And at this point in time, you start to have another one of the kind of interesting Frank hearing things going on. It says Frank inserted a gnarled finger into his ear and rotated it, owing no doubt to a buildup of earwax. He heard the word Quidditch, which was not a word at all.
Yeah, I love that line.
Yeah.
Very funny, very funny. So here we have Frank, the deaf man with a lot of earwax.
And sparse neck hair.
And sparse neck hair. Still hearing great. Let's see. What is? Hold on, let me read what my next note is here.
Well, the next thing I have here is Wormtail responding, "The Quidditch World Cup, my lord." And it's like, they've been on this long journey together. They've been spending a lot of time together. It's been at least 2+ months since Peter has escaped and gone to Albania to find him. It's like, do you mean you guys went through the whole Bertha Jorkins incident? That whole thing. You traveled all the way here, and at no point in time you guys have covered this part of the plan?
Like, why we need to wait until the World Cup is over? Like, that hasn't come up at all? You're right. It's like, come on, guys. Like, Voldemort's really picky about what details he's sharing.
He is, yes.
But then he says, so that's his answer. And it's honestly probably just more for our benefit so that we, the reader, can get a little more clued in.
It's called exposition.
Exposition indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, right. But Voldemort gets to explain it to him in an extremely condescending way. He says, because, fool, every meddler from the Ministry of Magic will be on duty on the watch for signs of unusual activity, checking and double-checking identities, which I circled that because that is actually a huge hint. It means that someone's identity is in question. And if you were like a really avid reader when you first read this, that is like oh boy, someone's not who you think they are. And it's going to be like, it is so well placed in this book to like put that question mark over your head, because this book, unlike the Percy Weasley fake out in Chamber of Secrets, is going to give you umpteen million people to be suspect of.
Yes, it is indeed. Yeah. And I mean, it really is fascinating how many details are included in this first chapter of this book that like are prominent details for major plot points further on down the road, and you basically just let them like bleed right out of your ears.
You do. It is unbelievable how much you let them bleed out of your ears. And then, but to be fair, there's also at least one massive thing they keep talking about that doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Well, we'll talk
come
about
back to that. Yep. But also, not for nothing, he says they'll be checking and double checking identities, which they don't actually do any identity checks when we get to the World Cup. And the thing they're talking about doing is attacking Moody so that they can like steal his identity.
Right.
And I don't think Moody even goes to the Quidditch World Cup. So none of these concerns make any sense.
Right. Yep. Yeah. They don't end up coming. But maybe they thought Moody was like a huge Quidditch fan or something.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Who's to say? I don't know.
He does have that super cool broom that's sort of like a lean back style versus like a ride forward style.
That's a movie only thing, Ben. I don't believe that for a second.
Jay, tell me how you feel about that broom.
I don't like that broom. I think that's like, I think Moody can ride a regular broom.
It reminds me of those motorcycles that have like the really, really comically tall handlebars.
Yeah.
Choppers? Like a chopper.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a chopper.
Yeah.
That's how he rolls. Let's see here. And so then this is where a little bit of Frank's experience in the military seems to be coming in, because he doesn't understand the words of Ministry of Magic, wizards, and muggles. Plainly, each of these expressions meant something secret, and Frank could think of only two sorts of people who would speak in code: spies and criminals.
Yeah. Oh man, I guess he's wrong though, obviously.
Yeah,
because he's not casting a wide enough net here to wizards.
Yeah. Come on, man.
Come on, dude.
You're leaving out a very important inclusion on that list.
It does, but I know he is. But then let's see. Wormtail is really concerned because he doesn't want to use Harry to do the plan. He just thinks it's too dangerous. They're going to get caught. He's going to be in trouble, which is, of course, Wormtail's main concern at all times. But so he's trying to talk Voldemort out of using Harry's blood for his revival. And he says it out loud. He says, "It could be done without Harry Potter, my lord." And I'm just going to highlight that because people always forget this line. They're like, no, it had to be Harry. And it's like, it did not have to be Harry.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
It only had to be Harry because Voldemort says it has to be Harry, because he's determined for it to be Harry.
Yeah.
But I do think literally on the very next page, Voldemort will confirm the phrase, "I could use another wizard," said the cold voice softly. That is true.
Yep.
And I don't know. I mean, it is kind of one of those things that I only would put such emphasis on it because I know how many comments we've gotten where people have brought this up. But it says it there.
Yeah. It says it there. Voldemort admits he could use a different wizard to come back.
Right.
And of course, it wouldn't really matter. Like, The thing is, Harry is protected from Voldemort pretty much no matter what. If Voldemort used another wizard's blood, then Lily's protection would just still be in place against Voldemort specifically.
True.
So if he tried to cast a spell, the same thing would happen. But if he uses Harry, all it really lets him do is physically touch him. If he, obviously he's still anchoring Harry to life now via the blood in himself.
Right.
So he can cast spells at him. He can touch him, but he's still anchoring him. So he's just already lost.
Yeah. Which, I mean, as per always, Voldemort is definitely like his own worst enemy. He like undoes everything all the time. He is
all the time.
He's in his own way.
Yeah. And there's a nice line from Wormtail here who says, "My lord, I do not say this out of concern for the boy. The boy is nothing to me," which it's funny that he has to clarify this, but it's also not true because eventually that one moment of mercy from Harry will ring through to Peter and cause him that moments of hesitation, which then will cause him to be killed by Voldemort.
Yes, indeed. Yep. That is going back to Prisoner of Azkaban and the fact that Harry does not allow Sirius and Lupin to kill him after discovering that he was the one to betray the Potters.
Yeah. Then we get some, whereas the last book, Sirius was being incredibly vague for the sake of revealing that, Peter was alive and was Scabbers. Now we're going to be vague just to confuse the readers. Or it says, the thing could be done so much more quickly. And it's like, oh yeah, the thing. Your revival could be done so much more quickly. We could say that. But no, that'd be too easy for the readers to know what was coming, I suppose. And he says, I can disguise myself most effectively. That's talking about turning into a rat, which is interesting because even though Peter has this amazing ace in the hole ability, we will not see him use it again. Ever.
Yep.
The same way Lupin will never turn into a werewolf again.
Right.
Yep.
Sirius does turn into a dog, though.
Sirius turns into a dog. Try this one on for size. Fenrir Greyback, who you will hear as the most dangerous werewolf in all of werewolves, will never be a werewolf on page.
Never.
Why
we don't get a battle between Fenrir and Lupin at the Battle of Hogwarts in werewolf form is beyond me.
I can't believe
it would be epic.
I can't believe when the Snatchers collect Harry, Ron, and Hermione, he's not in werewolf form.
Like, do you think he would be like coherent enough?
I think they could Wolfsbane him some potion. Voldemort could be like, man, make Fenrir the Wolfsbane potion, Snape, and Snape would have to do it. And
so I guess that's true.
Yeah, he could do it.
It just would have been worth having it happen at any point in time.
It would just be so scary to have him like lucid as a werewolf.
Yes, it would.
Doing stuff. Like, I'd believe they could capture Harry, Ron, and Hermione that way,
Right. Well, because even under that premise, Lupin says that like his mind is his own when he's taking like the Wolfsbane potion, but he's still transformed. But the problem is that Fenrir, even in human form, has a pretty vicious way of acting.
Exactly. Like he says, he like positions himself when he's in werewolf form near who he wants to bite, just so he's like I've got a pretty good chance at getting them after I transform, just because I'm nearby.
Right.
But like, if he took the Wolfsbane potion, like Lupin takes it so that he can like curl up and be safe. But like Fenrir could take it so that he could be even more dangerous.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like that we miss Fenrir in werewolf form is beyond me. But it doesn't happen, nor does Lupin transform again, nor will Peter transform again.
That's a change that if they wanted to do in the HBO series, like 10 years from now when we finally get to the last installment.
Yeah.
If you want to have a battle between werewolves at the Battle of Hogwarts, I'd be all for it.
Absolutely. If you want to have Fenrir like destroying Lavender Brown and then Lupin tackles him off her, it's too late, and then, he dies too, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Because he dies anyway.
Permission granted.
We got to have some, may as well get a cool battle out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Back to the book. And then Voldemort pretends to agree. I could use another wizard. That is true. And Wormtail's his sense of relief. He's just like, oh, my lord, it makes sense. Laying hands on Harry Potter will be so difficult. He's so well protected. Which I think is funny for Wormtail to say because you slept next to him for 3 years.
You were right there, man.
You were so well positioned to do something about Harry Potter and you just did nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is where you learn almost right away that Voldemort is completely onto him. This is like the Legilimens ability at hard work. It said, could the suggestion of abandoning the plan be nothing more than an attempt to desert me? My lord, I have no wish to leave you at all, none at all. Do not lie to me, hissed the second voice. I can always tell, Wormtail. You are regretting that you ever returned to me. I revolt you. It's like, well, that's understandable, but yes. He has basically hit the nail clean on the head. And then Voldemort does go on to further say, your devotion is nothing more than cowardice. This is something that Sirius has basically pointed out in the last book in the Shrieking Shack, like word for word. Like, he's like, I mean, you never did anything that didn't like benefit you.
Oh yeah. And it's like interesting to note that it means like Voldemort is correct. Like, so he says like the boy is nothing to me or whatever. And it's like, I suppose even that maybe that is true, but he says could the suggestion of the plan be nothing more than an attempt to desert me? And like, that must be true. Like, Wormtail is trying to abandon Voldemort because Voldemort knows he's lying.
Yeah.
You know, so like, it's interesting that that's true. I love the language he uses with him, though, where he says, you're regretting you ever returned to me. I revolt you. I see you flinch when you look at me. Feel you shudder when you touch me. It's like, what are you guys dating now?
I know. Yeah. It's like, you could easily just like convert this into a sitcom between two new roommates.
Oh man, yeah, it's a weird situation. Like, what does Frank think he's overhearing?
I know. Yeah, it's like, what? Who are these people?
I know. What is going on in that room? But yeah, you're right. That like everything he says, like, is just like Sirius is completely correct in the Shrieking Shack.
Yep.
But he says, "How am I to survive without you? And I need feeding every few hours. Who is to milk Nagini?" Which is like how am I to survive without you? Like, he can't actually die at this point, so. You know, you'll survive pretty much no matter what.
Yeah. But it does sound like, I mean, the very next thing that Voldemort says is, let's see here. A few days alone will be enough to rob me of the little health I have regained under your clumsy care. Silence!
Yeah.
So it sounds like whatever this like sort of a baby-like state, the kind of like primitive form that they've been able to get Voldemort stashed into is sort of like it's requiring a fair bit of upkeep to maintain.
Sounds like having to be, fed snake venom every few hours, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Which I think is probably contributing to why when he is reborn, he looks like a snake.
I would agree with you. Yeah. That's like a big, it's a big question as to whether or not like Voldemort, when he was last reigning, like when he attacked the Potters, like, did he just look like a man?
Right. Did he like, that is the thing. Like when he attacked the Potters, like, did he have hair? Did he have a nose?
The hair thing is what
I know
trips me out the most.
I know. Maybe he had hair, maybe not. I feel like he had a nose.
Right. Yeah, I think he would have had a nose.
Yeah.
He would have had a nose.
Yeah.
I think the slits are more of like part of the transformation.
The slits are more part of the transformation. It seemed like he used to have like the red behind his eyes, and when he comes back, he just has red eyes. Yeah, so it's like all of that. But I think he looked more like a man when he attacked Harry, and when he comes back, he looks more like a snake. But anyway, so Voldemort goes on to explain to Wormtail that he has his reason for using the boy, which is to get underneath the sacrificial love, which I'm surprised he doesn't just tell Wormtail what the reasons are, because when the Death Eaters come back, he's going to explain it in detail to all of them as a crowd, but not to the guy who's helping him get there.
Right, yeah. I wonder if that's just like the lack of respect that Voldemort has for Wormtail, even at all. It's just like, I'm not going to give you the reason. I will tell my true followers.
Yeah, that does. You're right, actually. It is just a level of disrespect. But then you do get to see like the way in which Voldemort thinks right here. He says, I've waited, like Wormtail's saying, like, we could do it so much faster. We could probably have it in like 2 days you could be back. And he says, no. I've waited 13 years. A few more months will make no difference. And this is like how Voldemort thinks, because he interprets himself as immortal, and immortality is very patient.
It is, yeah. I think that's like one of the big things you can never underestimate about his approach to things. It's like he's not in a huge hurry because his intention is to live forever. So like, if 2,000 years from now he looks back on taking 15 years to accomplish his goal, it's like, well, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Here I am.
Yeah. It was, it was a lot of work in the beginning, but now I'm 2,000 years old.
Right, exactly. And I'm still going strong, and I still rule the world or something, whatever he's trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. So it says, all that is needed is a little courage from you. Courage you will find unless you wish to feel the full extent of Lord Voldemort's wrath, which is a weird threat coming from a guy who said that if you left, I would lose all the strength I had.
It's a weird argument, that's for sure.
He's like, yeah, I have no strength. I mean, pretty strong. I could like really destroy you right now, but like almost no strength. You know?
I could bench press 225, no problem.
No problem. Yeah, you don't even want to see how angry I could get at you, Wormtail. I will destroy you. I'm pretty weak.
I'm pretty
don't leave.
weak.
Please don't leave. I'm very weak. I need feeding in the night. I'm a baby. I will kill you.
Where is my bottle?
Where is my bottle? Bring it to me now, or feel my wrath. But please don't leave.
But please don't leave.
Yeah.
Also, I hate you.
Also, I hate you. Yeah, that's kind of what this conversation feels like.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh
my gosh.
It reminds me of this one obscure quote from the movie School of Rock where the little boy goes, "You're tacky and I hate you."
Yeah.
Voldemort says that to Wormtail.
Voldemort says that to Wormtail. Almost for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. But Wormtail continues to like try and convince him, try and talk some sense into him. Says Bertha Jorkins' disappearance will not go unnoticed for long, and if we proceed, if I murder, now this is the thing that like there's all these things that are going to kind of drip out of your head, but Wormtail says, if I murder, who is he talking about? Right? Like they are going to continue to talk about a plot to murder somebody as part of the plan to get to Harry. There is no person.
Yeah, it says, "Come, Wormtail, one more death and our path to Harry Potter is clear."
Right.
And I don't know. So I highlighted this as well. I underlined it and I wrote a note next to it that was just like, is this Moody? Like, is the original objective like the plan is already in place to impersonate Moody, and someone inside of the plan just doesn't know yet that you can't polyjuice someone who is dead? And so it's like, because I mean, they keep Moody alive because they need to continue to polyjuice off of him,
right?
And so like that is the basic reason, but maybe at this point in time, like that's the only key plot for someone who is going to be a victim of their actions prior to Cedric, who they couldn't possibly predict.
No, I know, and like Barty Crouch Sr. will die at the hands of Barty Crouch Jr. Like someone else will die, but it's like that wasn't part of the plan.
It's also not instrumental in enacting the plan.
I know.
Either.
It's like it is. As I'm thinking about it, it's like it's possible they are still talking about Barty Crouch Sr. at this point, right? Because Bertha Jorkins knows that Barty Crouch Jr. is at the house.
Let's see. Yeah, because what we will eventually know is that Bertha Jorkins went to the Crouch household to deliver some papers, and upon entering the house, discovers that Barty Crouch Jr. is alive. Barty Crouch Sr. is the one who comes in and erases her memory
of that,
of that particular instance. And this is part of like why like Bertha is so like kind of, you know, squiggly, I guess, so to speak, despite the fact that Sirius is also going to say that even in high school or during her time at school, she was an idiot.
Yeah.
But
well, you know what? I was gonna say like maybe it's possible they meant we have to kill Barty Crouch Sr. so that we can free Barty Crouch Jr. And what happens is they don't have to do that because Barty Crouch Jr. just sort of breaks free of his own accord
during the
Quidditch World Cup. But that's not the case either, because what he says is like, what is it? Wormtail says, if we proceed, if I murder, and he says, come Wormtail, one more death on our Harry Potter is clear. I am not asking you to do it alone. By that time, my faithful servant will have rejoined us. So they're not doing it to free the faithful servant. They are anticipating him already being with them.
Yeah.
So I don't know who they're talking about here because they don't kill anybody else. The only other person they're targeting is Moody, and by all accounts, they overpower him and could easily kill him, but don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I come back to the idea that it seems like such a boring explanation is we didn't realize that we couldn't polyjuice him, but we read the textbook and we're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. But in the meantime, it just becomes really this is really misleading to the reader.
Right.
Because it doesn't seem like this is part of the plan. And it's not explained away.
Right. And alternatively, it also can't be Harry because Harry is like only to be killed by Voldemort. So it's not like he is suggesting here, like, Peter, you're you're going to, along with my faithful servant, have to kill Harry.
Well, he says one more death and our path to Harry is clear.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not Harry. I don't know who they're talking about. except possibly Moody, who obviously they decide not to kill, even though they really could have.
I am looking forward to the comments where somebody is like, guys, it's so and so, and it's gonna be like, oh,
No, that comment's not gonna happen.
no,
Nope.
okay, all right. Well, it sounds good. Well, then let's see here. As we move forward, though, yeah, we get the line that says, by that time, my faithful servant will have rejoined us, and then Wormtail is like, I am a faithful servant.
Yeah.
And then, well,
As if he didn't just get accused of trying to desert him.
right? Yeah, like 1 page ago.
Accurately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wormtail, I need somebody with brains.
Yeah.
Somebody whose loyalty has never wavered, and you unfortunately fulfill neither requirement.
Oh, I found you. Now, you gotta feel like there's a little Gryffindor in him standing up for himself right here. It's like, oh, I found you. I brought you Bertha Jorkins. Which is good. So the Bertha Jorkin things is good suspense for the whole book, because whilst Harry is going to witness this entire conversation and remember it with clarity, he'll remember everything except that Voldemort killed Bertha Jorkins.
Yeah.
That name will elude him.
Yes, it will. And so we, the readers, are going to get to, despite the fact that we are told right here what happens to Bertha Jorkins, we will have however many pages, like 750 pages of whatever happened to Bertha Jorkins.
I know. It's like it's like either you remember it and you're like so frustrated that like you know what happened to her. It keeps Voldemort present because he's going to have this chapter and then not show up again until the very end, really.
Right.
Like Harry will have like one dream, I think, at some point where he realizes like, but who held the wand? Or whatever. But like otherwise, we're not going to see a lot of Voldemort. But this like is a way to keep Voldemort in front of you because you know that Voldemort killed her. And so every time they bring up Bertha Jorkins, it's like, yeah, they're not caring. And you're like, oh, if they just cared a little bit more.
Right.
You know,
Yep. That would get you somewhere.
that would do it. But so yeah, it creates good tension throughout the book here. But he says, that's true. A stroke of brilliance I would have not thought possible from you, Wormtail. Though, if truth be told, you were not aware how useful she would be. And he says, I thought she might be useful. And he says, liar. And it's like, but then why would he bring her to you?
I know.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like he goes out to like a pub and he comes back and he's like, my lord, guess what I found? It's like, and who is she?
Who is she?
Like, well, I don't know, but maybe useful. And then it's like, okay, we do a whole bunch of magic and everything, and we discover that she is in fact useful. But like, Peter, you couldn't have known that.
Yeah, I don't think he could have known how useful she'd be, but I don't think it's like, why would he bring her to him if he didn't think she could be useful at all?
I know. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so now Voldemort, I think, is just being mean because he's like, his own logic doesn't make sense here, as it rarely does. But then I love how he says, the information was invaluable. Without it, I could never have formed our plan, and for that, you will have your reward, one that many of my followers would give their right hand to perform, which is, it is so funny. He's punning him right now, man.
He really is. I mean, I have to imagine that that Voldemort is like, was anybody listening? Because that was so clever
like,
just now.
Right.
His right hand. One
like,
day.
One day you'll get the joke.
Right. Yeah. It's almost too bad that like there's not like a reason for, because I guess Voldemort as like the baby form or whatever is thrown in the cauldron by the time Peter has to cut his hand off eventually. But wouldn't it be like really funny if there was like a little bubble that was like hee hee?
That'd be great. He's like
Voldemort's just down there amidst all the bubbles and it's like, that moment came.
I know.
He's giving his right hand.
I would love it if he was just like, here, Wormtail, put this note in your pocket. After you put in the bone, just take out the bone and then read the note, okay? Do it that order.
Do it in that order.
Just that, okay, you got it? Okay, cool. I'm so excited. Oh my god.
This is gonna be the best.
And Wormtail opens there and he's like, my right hand. Oh, I get it. Oh no.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, that would be hilarious. That's not what happens. Anyway, And then he says, "Really, my lord, what will the reward be?" And Wormtail says, "You don't want me to spoil the surprise." oh, the dramatics.
Oh man.
Oh, Voldemort, he's so theatrical, you know.
And then he says, "You will have the honor of being just as useful as Bertha Jorkins." To which I was like, high praise.
High praise.
Yeah,
High praise.
Because another person, let's see here, because at some point in time, Sirius will refer to her as an idiot.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, yay, get to be as important as Bertha Jorkins.
Yeah. So he says, "You're going to kill me too?" But no, he's not, obviously. He says, "I killed Bertha because I had to. She was fit for nothing after my questioning. Quite useless." So this is another interesting thing, is that, like, despite just being a little baby form or whatever it is here, he is still able to kill Bertha. Like, he's still powerful enough to, like, cast Avada Kedavra.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just sort of another like, you get to see, like, his evaluation of what counts as, like, worth being alive, and it's like, if you have something to offer Voldemort, you're allowed to be alive, and if you don't, then
who cares?
Doesn't really matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And yes, then he goes on to say that wizards who are supposed to be dead would do well to not run into the Ministry of Magic,
which is at a wayside inn.
Yep. And then Wormtail muttered something that so quietly that even Frank, with his supersonic hearing, could not hear it. But it made the second man laugh, an entirely mirthless laugh, cold as his speech. Something that I like to think was something like ha ha ha.
Yeah.
That's how he laughs in Deathly Hallows, in case somebody didn't get that reference. But then Voldemort says, "We could have modified her memory, but memory charms can be broken by a powerful wizard. As I proved when I questioned her, it would be an insult to her memory to not use the information I extracted from her, Wormtail."
It is interesting too, because he's like he cannot let Wormtail have even a sense that he did anything right at any point ever. Where he's like, "I brought you Bertha Jorkins," and he's like, "Yes, she was very useful, but you really shouldn't have been running into people at all, should you?"
Right.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, but it was really helpful, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
We got a lot out of that.
Yeah.
And the memory charm being broken thing, I think I mentioned this possibly earlier, but that's going to be undoing the memory spells that Barty Crouch Sr. had placed on Bertha Jorkins.
Yes, it is.
And that's the way that you're able to discover everything that's going on, that Barty Crouch Jr. is still alive.
Yeah. Yes. But so now Frank is starting to he's starting to become like a lot more afraid. He's like, "Oh my gosh, the man with the cold voice had killed a woman," which is interesting because he has no idea that it's the same guy, the same teenager he saw like all those years ago.
That's true.
You know, but it is.
Yep. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So he's literally encountered this exact person before.
Yes, he has. And he's seen them murder or not seen them do it, but like suspected them of doing it. So he's starting to catch on that he's pretty dangerous. I love this line. It says, "And he was planning more murders." This boy, Harry Potter, whoever he was, probably not important.
Yeah.
Who was that kid?
Read a book.
Come on, man. There's like 7 of them. You're in one.
Yeah. You're in one.
Yeah. Nah, you're in one. Yeah.
You
best start believing in ghost stories, Miss Swan. You're in one.
We're jumping all over the place today.
Oh man, I think it might be time for a Pirates rewatch, if I'm being honest.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But yeah, now Frank has finally reached the point where he's like, okay, now I need to go to the police. He would creep out of the house, head straight for the telephone box in the village.
Not one in the house.
Not one in the house.
Yes, there's not one in the house. Although maybe you just don't want to go downstairs and run into the roaming cow.
Right.
Yeah. Moo. Yeah. Exactly. Seems probably pretty deadly. But yeah, so I wonder how it would go if he managed to do this. Like if the police show up at the house, like then they're just all dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all dead.
Yeah.
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 Not gonna do anything.
So then we get a double down here though. Voldemort says, "One more murder. My faithful servant at Hogwarts, Harry Potter, is as good as mine."
Again, one more murder. What are you talking about?
I know, yeah. They're really a big setup for something that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it is. But quiet, I think I hear Nagini. He was hissing and spitting without drawing breaths. That's him speaking parcel mouth. Which is also kind of interesting. It's like that you speak parcel mouth out loud. Like snakes don't have ears, that they can't really hear stuff. It's just like interpreting the vibrations in the air, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But I guess that's how it works.
It must be.
Or magical snakes can hear them, or through magic they can hear it, I guess. I don't know.
Something of the sort?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think through magic.
I think it has to be through magic,
That's what I
because
would
it's
think.
not like Harry, because Harry loses the ability. afterwards. It's not like, yeah. So I think it is through magic. But yeah, so now we get a first good description of Nagini, a gigantic snake, at least 12 feet long. Boy, Frank is in a real bad spot right now. He says, stared at its undulating body, cut a wide curving track through the thick dust on the floor. So not how it's depicted as like a waveform crawling like a, I don't know, like a worm or something, like an inchworm.
Yeah. The inchworm idea is kind of like, it's kind of like,
Good. Yeah. Like an accordion on the ground.
Right,
Yeah. So what was he to do? The only means of escape was into the room where the two men were plotting murder. And if he stayed where he was, the snake would surely kill him, which is like, yep, that is exactly the situation you are in, sir.
Yeah, it has become what they refer to as a lose-lose.
Yeah, you are in a bad spot, dude.
Yes.
And so he even catches on. Like, he's like, he's starting to accept some things. Like, he's visited by a strange idea that this man could talk to snakes. So it's like, actually, that's a pretty good guess for someone who doesn't know about magic at all.
Right, yes. Yeah. Piecing the bits together rather quickly.
Yep. And he says, he wanted nothing more than to be back in his bed with his hot water bottle. Which is like, poor guy.
I know. It's like a 77-year-old's version of like a teddy bear going on here. It's like, I just want to be back in my bed.
I know. He's like, oh man, shouldn't have come up to the house.
Darn it. I haven't been here in years, and the one time I return.
I know. The one time I come up here, I die. Yes. So he said, so now Nagini is talking to him, says, according to Nagini, there's an old muggle standing right outside this room listening to every word we say. It's like, Frank must hear him say that, and he is like, uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy. Things are bad. And like immediately Wormtail goes to check on it, and he's like, invite him inside, Wormtail. Where are your manners? So polite, Voldemort,
Always.
The formalities must be observed.
Oh, nailed it. Yeah,
yes,
like in dueling.
Yes, in dueling with Harry. Yeah. So let's see. I love the description of Nagini here, that she is curled up on the rotting hearth rug like some horrible travesty of a pet dog.
What a visual.
What a visual indeed. Like, so creepy. Let's see. The fire is the only source of light in the room, casting the long, spidery shadows on the wall. And so he starts talking to him, says, you heard everything, Muggle. And let's see. For now, that he was inside the room, the time had come for some sort of action. He felt braver. It had always been so in the war. Which, like, good for Frank. He's not just going to, like, cower down and die.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is where I think sort of like the Gryffindor vibes are coming through in Frank a little bit, where he's much more defiant all of a sudden. It's sort of like, and I think that this actually happens in real life. Like, the anticipation of something bad can be the worst part, but sometimes, like, when you're facing it down, it's like, okay, here we go.
We go.
Now is when the bravery finally kicks in.
And he gets he gets kind of clever here. He says, I don't know what you mean by wizard, but he says, I'll tell you this too. My wife knows I'm up here, and if I don't come back, which is like, it's a pretty good little lie.
Yeah,
just come up with on the spot. Like, oh yeah, guess what? Like, so there's someone else you're gonna have to worry about. But now, don't forget here that at this point, Voldemort is still not facing Frank. There is no eye contact happening between the two. And Voldemort is still very easily able to read his mind from, like, behind the chair. Hasn't even looked at the guy yet. He says, you have no wife. Nobody knows you're here. You told nobody you were coming. Do not lie to Lord Voldemort, Muggle, for he knows. He always knows. Except for Snape, of course.
Except for Snape, who does successfully hoodwink him forever and ever.
But this must just be so easy for Voldemort to be reading his mind. Like, he has no defenses, no magical ability to withhold the information. He's just combing through him like an open book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And let's see here. Then Frank is, I do sort of like this response. Frank has some nice moments right here at the end.
He's got some spunk, yeah.
Lord, is it? Well, I don't think much of your manners, my lord.
Oh, he's taunting him.
Turn around and face me like a man, why don't you?
Oh, and his response is so good. He says, but I am not a man, Muggle. It's like, oh, that's scary.
It's like, uh-oh.
What do you think he's going to turn around? I am much, much more than a man.
Spoilers, it's another cow.
It's a cow. Oh, no. However, why not? I will face you. Wormtail, come turn my chair around. He's like, oh, boy. Uh-oh. Here we go. Bad news. Yeah, you heard me, Wormtail. He does not seem like he wants to do it, but he does. And then says, and then the chair was facing Frank, and he saw what was sitting in the chair. His walking his walking stick fell to the floor with a clatter. He opened his mouth to let out a scream. He was screaming so loudly that he never heard the words. The thing in his chair spoke as it raised its wand. There was a flash of green light, a rushing sound, and Frank Bryce crumpled.
Yeah, so this is sort of like it's a really interesting way to paint this particular scene because again we've kind of got that like Azkaban guard Dementor situation going on where you need to set it up in such a way that this is not the moment that we are introduced to the words Avada Kedavra.
Right, exactly, because we're going to learn about that later.
We're gonna learn about it later, and we're gonna learn about it in a way that is like more meaningful than it would be like attached to like the death of Frank Bryce.
Yeah.
And so basically, yeah. So he was screaming so loudly that he didn't hear the words, but we will learn what those words.
We will learn what the words are, and we've been told about the flash of green light a bunch of times at this point in like Harry's Dementor memories, or like when he concentrates really hard at night, he can remember the flash of green light. So we know the flash of green light was present at like the attack on Harry.
Right.
And now we get much more of a sense of like what actually happened.
Yes.
That like, oh, he was casting a killing, like something that will kill you. It is a killing curse.
Yeah.
Because it says he was dead before he hit the floor. 200 miles away, the boy called Harry Potter woke with a start, which like, chills, man. It's a very good start.
Boom. I know.
Boom.
Yeah, so there we go. I mean, and it's a fascinating kickoff because I mean we are in I think one of only 4 chapters in the whole story that are not Harry centric.
Yeah, so I think because we have the very first chapter, The Boy Who Lived.
The Boy Who Lived.
That's from Vernon's point of view. We have this one, which is from like Frank / Voldemort's point of view.
Yep. And then we will end up having Spinner's End, and
Then I think this is the start of Deathly Hallows where they're like plotting about the 7 Potters. Right?
Maybe so.
I think so because it like starts with the 2 Death Eaters entering Malfoy Manor.
Yeah,
Is that it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but anyway, I mean, it's Precious Few. I do think this is a particularly good one. I do think it's going to be very interesting the way that even like Harry is going to sort of like react to the dream as we get into chapter 2 here, which is of course the Scar, which I'm looking forward to. So we get back to some Harry action.
We sure do. We sure do get back to some Harry action here. He's going to make a really weird decision in the next chapter, which I'm going to scream at him for.
Yeah, it'll be good times.
Yeah, it'll be good times. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
But whatever.
In the meantime, though, Jay, before we close out today's episode, do you have a review for us?
Oh, I sure do have a review. Let me open it up right here. This review is going to come from Ninja Nerd Girl.
Ninja Nerd Girl.
Maybe
how
she's
are
related
we?
to Frank, and all of his silent movings through the house.
Yeah, I bet so.
Yeah, she says, I can apparate now. Hey, brother, today's my 17th birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
So I finally get to read Deathly Hallows. I just got past the Potter watch part, and I love this. Oh, she's just reading Deathly Hallows.
Oh, wow.
Mid-book. Oh, wow.
Man.
There's
okay.
so many plot twists, like the Deathly Hallows symbol, 2 of which I am wearing around my neck currently. I enjoyed this show since book 1, chapter 8. So here's my question. Why didn't the Golden Trio send Lee a letter to read to the Potter Watch listeners? It would make morale skyrocket and update their allies on their task, like Remus. Plus the added bonus of making Mrs. Weasley worry even more than she already is. What are you, anti-Mrs. Weasley?
So the idea here is Lee Jordan is hosting Potter Watch.
Yes.
And why wouldn't the trio send word to Lee just to be like, hey, Lee, we're out here.
We're out here.
We're
yeah.
alive.
We're
fighting.
alive. Yeah. I mean, for one, I don't think they really have a means of communication with almost anyone. Like they don't have Owl.
Hedwig.
Yeah, they don't have Hedwig anymore. Don't forget that Hedwig is dead. And they're not traveling like with an owl or anything like that. So they don't necessarily have a good means of communication anyway. Like maybe not impossible to track down an owl or something. But at the same time, I don't think you want to like nobody knows where they are at all.
Right.
And it's like that includes the Death Eaters.
Yep.
So it's like you don't want if here's the real reason why. If Lee goes on the air and says that he has gotten a letter from Harry Potter, then even though the radio show is protected by password, it's really not that hard to figure out who it is. You know, if anyone hears the show and hears that Lee has had contact with Harry Potter, Lee is dead.
Lee is definitely
Lee
dead
is
at that
dead.
point in time.
Or
Yeah.
tortured.
Or definitely. And then unfortunately, then you have like a little bit of like a Longbottom situation. Well, maybe not even Longbottom situation, but like Lee is not going to know where he is.
Yeah,
So
Lee's also not going to,
He's not even going to be capable of giving up Harry if he's tortured, which would be terrible.
Right.
The other thing that I think is kind of interesting about it, and possibly based on where you're at in the story, could be kind of spoilery. So maybe just a small heads up on that front. One of the things that I really appreciate about what's happening outside in the greater wizarding world is that, you know, I mean, granted, to be fair, it kind of seems like the Order of the Phoenix is losing for all intents and purposes. But I do always really like the fact that even without like a constant like boost of morale, the defenders of Hogwarts have not lost their spirit. So like Neville has done like a really good job, and Ginny, you know, and the former members of the DA of continuing to kind of like fight the good fight because they have unwavering faith in their cause.
Yeah.
And I think that that's even further demonstrated by like when Harry is brought back and is believed to be dead, you know, with the conquering party after Voldemort, you know, essentially supposedly defeats him in the woods. Neville still steps forward and he's like, you know, yeah, so Harry's gone, but like we don't stop fighting because this is like what we stand for.
Right.
So not that it discredits your concept that it would improve morale. It's almost like cool to me that like despite the fact that there wasn't reason to have increased morale, all of these good people were still continuing to do the good thing.
Yeah, and it's honestly kind of like a like a no news is good news situation.
True.
Where it's like the members of the order can take solace in the fact that Harry is still alive.
Right.
Because if he was dead, the Death Eaters would be parading around as loud as they could for the exact opposite reason, to just demoralize everybody.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yep. So if anything, it's almost surprising that they weren't even just doing that as like a false tactic.
It is. It is almost surprising.
Like we got him.
Yeah, we got him. He's
Harry's
out.
gone. Yeah.
Gone.
Yes, you're right. So I think even that is a very good point. Is the no news is good news. It's like it's just you know, until someone starts celebrating, you know.
Yeah.
We're still on.
We're
It's
still
not
good.
over.
Exactly. The war is still going. So I think that pretty much answers our question.
I believe
for the
so.
day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you everybody for listening. Make sure you join us next week for Chapter 2, The Scar, here on Through the Gryffindor.
Today's episode was edited by Ethan Edghill. Vaishon Brandon does our art. Catherine Stein is our production manager, and the show is hosted by me and Jonathan Carlin.